Good to go?
Okay, yes, we're rolling.
Alrighty. Great. Alright guys, well my name is Eric Metz. The cameraman, Dylan Shelton. We are activists with the Tax Wall Street Party. We are a formidable political party in the United States. We are one of 8 political parties that run candidates for office. And we are under the auspices that Wall Street is the enemy. Surprise, right? Wall Street is the enemy. And we would like to tax them. And notice the blue boxes say, keep calm and tax Wall Street, keep calm and seize the Fed. Notice it doesn't say, keep calm and fight Mexican illegal immigrants, keep calm and fight abortion, keep calm and fight for your gun rights. All those are very indispensable to some degree, but right now, given the economic and geopolitical strategic situations of the day, they are wedge issues, and we are called to focus on getting out of the current world depression. Our presentation tonight is entitled Bringing Jobs Back, Rebuilding America. The program in which I am going to try and present to you guys today will do exactly that. And I hope it makes you tick, because this program will, at least it did me when I first started and started to learn more about it, it totally lifted this pessimism away from me and this defeatism and gave me some solutions. Not just the problems, not just the bad stuff, but a way out. So that's what I hope to bring forward tonight, is tell you the enemy, tell you the problem, tell you who to tame and to tame down to size, but also give you the solutions on how to get back into shape as a country, as a species, as a world. And that is my goal for us tonight. These are our party leaders. Webster Tarpley, tremendous historian, author, very tremendous political activist, and basically one of the people that has taught me this system. And he is responsible for forming the UFAA, the United Front Against Austerity. We are unabashedly, unequivocally against austerity. Austerity just being a intellectual, sophisticated word for cuts to Medicaid, Medicare, food stamps, all the different social programs. We are absolutely against that in a world of trillions and trillions and trillions and trillions going to bankers, Wall Street. We are absolutely against it. So he and Daniela Walls, the chairwoman of the Tax Wall Street Party, also another tremendous activist, doing tremendous efforts every single day to get this party, to get this organization, this system, this ideology off the ground and within the public zeitgeist. And as you can tell, we are in the public zeitgeist. We are not too obscure. Russia Today, Press TV, Fox News, Webster has appeared on all of these. He's also appeared on CNN, various other news networks and alternative media networks. So we try and foist these ideas into the public sphere as much as we can. And they are certainly tremendous leaders. And that's just it. We need leaders. We need leaders. If not you, who? If not now, when? Get active or get radioactive. These are some of our favorite slogans. And these are some of the most formidable members of our organization in Silver Springs, Maryland, with Webster. Webster's giving a 3-day econothon. We call it an econothon, an economics marathon, if you will, where Webster got up 3 days in a row, literally in a row, and basically taught you guys what I'm trying to encapsulate in a half hour, 45 minutes. So no pressure. But nevertheless, we need leaders. It's not enough today to camp out in the park and say bad things about Wall Street and taunt Wall Street. We have to take power. We have to hit them in the Labanza and extract money. So if not you, who? If not now, when? We are under the auspices that we need leaders. And we need leaders to fight the world economic depression. Despite what the pundits, the politicians are telling us, despite the official, quote unquote, official unemployment numbers are today, despite where the markets are today, we are absolutely in a world economic depression, and it's getting worse, and we need to get out of it. Because if we have prolonged unemployment, prolonged immiseration, we're going to see death on a mass scale. And I'm not here to scare you tonight. There's enough fear porn out there for you to soak up. I'm not here to scare you. But if we don't have the right administrative measures to get out of this, there's going to be death. And we intend on fighting this depression with the American system of political economy. Now, show of hands, who has heard of the American system of political economy? Dylan, Brandon, you guys have. Well, there's a reason you guys haven't heard of it. Well, it works. It works. It's the best. It works. It's not perfect, but it works. And it's not new. We've seen it from Alexander Hamilton, Abraham Lincoln, Henry Carey, very formidable 19th century economist. FDR being the most successful president in the history of America, the most successful cycle in human history from 1933 to 1970. New Deal economics literally creates the middle class, and the demonization and the demagogy of Roosevelt is just the mark of an anti-historical consciousness. They just don't know the lay of the land. I'm sorry, I can't put it in any other way. But Roosevelt is our man. He was very successful in bringing this country to where it became an industrial powerhouse, and where the numerical majority of the society was the middle class. So it's not necessary to endorse everything that FDR stood for, nor is it necessary to endorse any one man's policy, one man's administration, but it is necessary to recognize the fact that he is the most successful president in implementing this kind of system that I have to show to you guys today. And of course, Kennedy challenged the Federal Reserve, gave us the NASA moonshot, wanted to break the CIA up into 1,000 different pieces, was very timid at least, to go to Vietnam. And you saw what happened to him. So, arguably the last great president we had, a strong, formidable presidency. The last one. The rest, since then, have been puppets. Feckless puppets, just not worth much. So, fighting the world.
Some of those 5 men were assassinated?
Yes, yeah. Kennedy, yeah, Lincoln, they were. Arguably FDR.
As well as Alexander Hamilton.
Oh, really? I've never heard of Alexander Hamilton. I'm interested to hear this. Arguably FDR. I could go into the backdrop of why FDR could have been assassinated. I won't do that here, but it's very possible. It's very probable. But anyway, fighting the world economic depression with the American system of political economy. Now, the enemy. How to tame the beast. Who pays for the depression? We're in a depression. Who's going to pay for it? Well, surprise, Wall Street's going to pay for it. We demand that Wall Street pay for it. They're the reason we're in this situation, by and large. There's other actors and players involved, but by and large, it's finance capital, the finance oligarchs. Wall Street is the enemy. So don't just camp out in the park and taunt them. Take power and tax them. A Wall Street sales tax. Every time you and I buy food, shoes, a product, anything in the marketplace, we pay 6 to 12% in sales tax depending on what state you're in. But when yuppies at the tip of Manhattan or anywhere else in America buy millions of dollars worth of derivatives contracts and stocks and bonds, and they speculate their butts off, they don't pay a dime. So that essentially means that we have a government subsidy for speculation and a government regressive tax on necessities and things that people need and use and want. This is absolutely backwards. Unbelievably backwards. And it's very hard to believe that the American people have not noticed this, because it's been going on since 1966. From 1913, I think, 14, to 1966, we had something like this on the books, where transactions on the exchange, speculative transactions, speculative turnover, change of ownership was taxed. Ever since then, not taxed. So, check out the chart at the bottom. $2 quadrillion. That's 2 quadrillion, that's 2,000 trillion dollars of derivatives. These are financial contracts, total paper based on paper, exotic paper, financial hokum. They're worthless, but yet they are phagocytating the real economy. They are sucking the life out of us as we speak. Nobody knows how many tens of trillions of dollars has been dragooned out of that Federal Reserve, our central bank, to prop this madness up. This is unbelievable. Think about what $30 trillion could have done for the American economy. Of $30 trillion of long-term, 0% interest credit. This could have rebuilt the country 5 times over. But no, it's being sucked into a black hole of worthless, kited derivatives. And quite frankly, that's not fair at all. And you can see there's been a lot of, over the years, a lot of public disarray about this. But nevertheless, the Wall Street sales tax, hit them in the Levans and make them pay. Don't just camp out in the park. Take power and make them pay. And the amount of revenue that this would generate is altogether formidable. Very conservative guesstimate would be in the range between $300 and $500 billion. That's very conservative. Very. Some say $1 trillion or more. But it's hard to tell, because once you implement a tax like this, all of that speculation and all of that trading and flash trading and all of the different mechanisms of speculation will go down. It would cool off the trading, cool off the speculation, so there obviously wouldn't be so many quadrillions of turnover. I failed to mention there's $2 quadrillion of derivatives around the world. It's about $600 to $700 trillion of derivatives just here in this country. But there's about $6 quadrillion of turnover, the sales turnover that happens. So you put a 1% tax on $6 quadrillion, and what do you have? $60 trillion. But obviously, we're not going to get $60 trillion of revenue, because that action and that speculation will seriously calm down, because these yuppies will suddenly learn that they can make the kind of money that they used to make with the 1% sales tax. So it's hard to guess how much revenue it would bring in, but it's most definitely in the hundreds of billions. But the main goal of this kind of tax, of this kind of policy, is not necessarily revenue, as formidable as that might be. It's mainly to strip political power away from them. We have to get finance capital out of our government. They're buying off our politicians like they're buying bubble gum at the candy shop. And it's not right. These people are speculative-minded, they're incompetent, and I failed to mention, if you haven't noticed, we have a decadent, degenerate, megalomaniac ruling class. Their priorities are not set with yours in mind. Their priorities are not with what is conducive for the rising standards of living of all of us. Their priorities is something totally, revolves around stuff that's totally different. And this kind of tax is meant to strip their political power away from them, so they can't buy off our government. So, a sales tax paid on stocks, bonds, derivatives, futures, options, indices, over-the-counter derivatives, foreign exchange, not people who are traveling, and changing in their dollars for yen, but people who speculate on the foreign exchange markets, treating our currencies as commodities in and of themselves. All this has got to be taxed, 1%. The proceeds of this tax should be split between federal and state governments to fund social obligations. Remember, we're anti-austerity, so we need taxes, and this is the best one, to fund these social obligations in the middle of a depression. Public payrolls, pensions, public infrastructure. This tax can go to fund numerous things. Things that are conducive for everybody. Now, this is not a wealth tax. This is a tax directed at financial speculators, professionals. So we're happy to give you a $1 million exclusion. So this tax won't affect anybody who's not a millionaire. $1 million per person. You got 4 people in the household, husband, wife, couple of kids, $4 million. Once you've reached that $4 million of buying stocks, bonds, derivatives, whatever you want to invest in, sorry, you're going to pay a tax. Financial re-regulation. We have to end all bailouts of banks, financial institutions, claw back the bailout money that was given or lent to financiers, abolish the notion of too big to fail, end all the foreclosures, make the banks eat the losses, don't kick people out of their homes in the middle of a depression. This is absolutely wrong. The Wall Street banks, Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan Chase, Morgan Stanley, Citibank, others, they must be seized by FDIC, the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, and put through Chapter 7 liquidation and have their exotic derivatives at least eliminated. And I'm going to go over some of the derivatives that need to be banned and eliminated and triaged with literally, you hit the shred key on the computer and you ban them. It's not clear if these mega banks will survive as a result of this tax. They may fall into bankruptcy. And that would cause some problems because they do provide a lot of credit to businesses that need revolving credit and need credit there. So it's hard to say whether we would let them fail and just have credit available with that Federal Reserve to businesses, or just nationalize them and just keep their commercial banking activities alive and well, but do away with their speculative bubble. So here's what we ban. Here's the derivatives, the exotic derivatives that we ban. Credit default swaps, CDSs. Basically what those things are is an insurance policy where if a yuppie in a Wall Street bank buys a mortgage-backed security, he can buy a credit default swap on that mortgage-backed security. If that mortgage-backed security goes bust, then that credit default swap that backs up that mortgage-backed security can give him his money back, or at least some. So it's an insurance policy. But now, anybody can buy CDSs. So if you think that Greek bonds are going to crash in the future, but you don't own Greek bonds, you can still buy credit default swaps that say Greek bonds are going to fail in the future and collect on that financial event. When you don't have, excuse me, the insurable asset to have that as collateral. So anybody can just buy these things and not have the asset to back it up. This has got to be banned. So ban them. So only people that have the asset should be able to purchase insurance. Collateralized debt obligations, CDOs. We'll take real estate. Basically, what happens with CDOs is a commercial bank, they make a loan, they sell that loan to Wall Street. That Wall Street bundles that loan into a derivative, a nice fancy derivative cocktail. They call it a mortgage-backed security, or they call it a collateralized debt obligation. They package it, slap a nice fancy fee on there, sell it to investors around the world. When it should be, you just go to a bank, get a loan, you pay that bank over the period of 30 years, and that's the end of it. But now, you have commercial banks selling their loans to yuppies on Wall Street, creating these exotic financial derivatives that are making the price of houses skyrocket and are creating a speculative fever on our houses. These are our houses, for God's sakes. It's our shelter. These things are of necessity, and they do not need to be in the hands of speculators. They need to be in the hands of the bank that makes you the loan. So, ban collateralized debt obligations. They're useless. Structured investment vehicles, SIVs, that's basically where one yuppie on a desktop computer gets online with another yuppie with a desktop computer, and they begin to structure deals. It's you give and I give. And you give me the bonds quoted on the Tokyo Exchange, and I give you the London, interbank rate, and so on and so on. And that can go on for infinity, quite frankly. Hundreds of permutations. So, pieces of financial hokum. SIVs need to be banned. Commodity index swaps, exchange traded funds based on synthetic commodity futures. Speculators do not deserve to run rampant on our commodities that we need, that we eat. Only the end users. So you need to re-regulate commodity markets with 100% margin requirements. What that essentially means is that you can only use your cash, just your cash, to speculate on the commodity markets with. Not borrowed money, leverage, margin. What we have now is essentially where a trader can put up, and we have 50-to-1 margin. That's the highest one. That's the highest level we have in today's economy. So that essentially means you can only put down $20 on a position that costs $1,000, and the broker lets you borrow that $980. That has to be banned. 100% margin requirements, position limits, of course. So heavy capital people with heavy and high capital bases cannot load up on positions on our commodity markets. So we need these anti-speculation measures. Only people who are involved in making grains, making and harvesting the corn and pork bellies, they can have the futures contract. They can be involved with this because they're the ones who have to sell this product at the price that they get with that futures contract. But if you're a speculator, you're just trying to make a buck with your account, you're not involved in growing this stuff, making this stuff, harvesting commodities. Sorry, you're going to have these anti-speculation measures foisted upon you. Now, we've got to reinstitute something like Glass-Steagall. Who knows what Glass-Steagall is? Raise your hand. Anybody? Glass-Steagall was a law that pretty much separated commercial banking from investment banking. You could be a commercial bank, you could be an investment bank, but you couldn't be both. But now, since the abolition of Glass-Steagall, with the Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act, excuse me, and the Commodity Futures Modernization Act that Clinton passed through, Glass-Steagall is pretty much done with, and they have let derivatives run wild. They have let banks consolidate other banks and join with other mega banks. See, now we have Bank of America, Merrill Lynch. We have J.P. Morgan and Chase together. That's got to be slowly but surely outlawed. We can't have exactly the law of Glass-Steagall in place today because derivatives are everywhere. The system is malignant, and derivatives are ubiquitous. They're everywhere, and we can't have exactly the Glass-Steagall law that we used to have, but we can make our way there surely and slowly but surely. Set a 10% maximum rate on interest on credit cards, payday loans. It's absolutely ridiculous that companies can charge over 20% on your interest for your credit cards. That's usurious, genocidal in my opinion. It's absolutely immoral. You got to restore those laws. We had it before in the early 80s, late 70s, somewhere around there. We can go to it again. Restore state and federal anti-usury laws, ban ARM mortgages, adjustable rate mortgages, and restore individual Chapter 11 bankruptcy laws, of course. Got free trade? You betcha we do. And people are sick of it, whether they know it or not. People are sick of it. And it's enough already. It sounds sexy, doesn't it? Free trade, free market, freedom, America. But as we see, this illustration clearly defines for us that it's just a giant sucking sound. Anybody who promotes free trade, whoever the infamous they are, they always say, relax, the capital, you open up your markets, the capital will just come flooding in. And every time, it goes flooding out. It goes flooding out every time to meet the lowest bidder. And that's what essentially has happened with free trade policies such as NAFTA, GATT. There's been a number of them. We got the Trans-Pacific Partnership coming up. If you haven't read up on that, you need to. And it's basically, like I said, a giant sucking sound. That's what this is what causes our industrial base to go overseas. Corporations find the lowest bidder. They pay Chinese workers, under $10 an hour, $5 an hour, whatever it is, to make goods. And it's a race to the bottom. We are a high-wage economy. We need high wages, not sweatshop wages. This is not conducive for high and rising standards of living. This is not conducive for that. So, therefore, we demand an immediate, emergency, and indefinite suspension of all these free trade agreements. A 15% protective tariff. Try that on for size. So we're going to say to these corporations, okay, you're going to go move your plant and your employees overseas, fine. You go right ahead. But you know what? You're going to pay a 15% tax on all those imported goods you send into this country. Enough said. Oh, and by the way, if you have any plant equipment, factory equipment that you're looking to tear down in the middle of that move over to another country, we're going to seize that under eminent domain. That's my opinion anyway. We need that infrastructure. So, paid to the Treasury by any importers of foreign goods or services. And this could go to raise revenue as well. Now, I've told you the problem. I've told you the enemy, the beast. It's time to tame the beast. I've told you how to tame it. Now, here gets to the fun part. This is the optimistic part. This is where I hope the pessimism will just go away and you will realize that jump-starting a full-blown economic recovery is not hard at all. All that's missing is credit, money, and political will. So, here at the UFAA and the Tax Wall Street Party, we have some concepts with the central bank. Nationalize the Federal Reserve. Don't abolish it. Our libertarian Austrian school friends, they like to say, abolish the Federal Reserve. In the Fed. In the Fed. You hear them chanting it all the time. Well, what you going to do if you're in the Fed, who knows how much financial turbulence you're going to create, because the Federal Reserve allows this country to stay afloat and not bankrupt itself. Second of all, it acts as a regulatory body for the big mega banks on Wall Street. So if you take away the Federal Reserve, yeah, you'd be hurting the big mega banks and the Wall Streeters by taking away their cheddar and their credit that they get. But you'd also be taking away a very formidable regulatory body that can be used to tame them. So you got to nationalize it, commandeer it, privatize it, seize it, whatever your terminology. Nationalize it, bring it under the Treasury, call it the National Bank of the United States. We had two national banks of the United States in the 19th century. And they served us well, especially the first one. Then came the Federal Reserve in 1913, 1914. And it has been run by unelected, unaccountable cliques of bankers. The money supply, interest rates of the United States has been determined by finance oligarchs that meet and decide this stuff in a dungeon, not in the light of day. This has got to be changed. So, no longer operated by and for unelected and unaccountable cliques of incompetent and predatory bankers, but the size of the money supply, interest rates, and approved types of lending must be determined in the light of day, passed by Congress, debated openly, signed by the President. Now people always say, now Eric, you're going to create a lot of volatility in the markets if you show people discussing monetary policy on live television. Well, you know what? There's already a lot of volatility in these markets already. And if you're scared about volatility, well, then start the hearings at 5 o'clock on 4 o'clock on Friday afternoon when the markets close. End it on Sunday afternoon when Japan opens. And if the hearings aren't done by then and we haven't decided the money supply and interest rates, well, oh well, there's going to be some market volatility in the coming week. But something as important as the money supply and interest rates, that needs to be debated openly. People need to know what's being said, not by these quackademic bankers that sit in a dungeon in the Federal Reserve and who knows what they talk about, because nobody knows. This needs to be out in the open. Now, we have to change the preferential lending for the Federal Reserve. Right now, the Federal Reserve lends to investment banks, insurance companies, not necessarily insurance companies, but they bail out insurance companies, but mostly depository institutions, banks. And we've tried it. A Federal Reserve, a central bank, a national bank only working for banks and banks only doesn't work. We have to change that, especially in the midst of an economic depression. So, institute 0% federal lending with preferential treatment for tangible things, physical production, manufacturing of goods, commodities, including industry, agriculture, construction, mining, energy production, transportation, infrastructure building, public works, scientific research. These are the things that are conducive to rising standards of living and technological and scientific progress. So we need to dragoon credit to this stuff. This is important stuff. But if you're a banker, you know, an investment banker, a speculator, a hedge fund, a gambling casino, a private prison, sorry, go take your chances in the free market that you love so much. One of the most cynical things the Obama administration has done, he did this in 2009, was to force GM and the automakers into bankruptcy and to shut down some of these plants. A lot of workers lost their jobs in the midst of a depression, especially back then. It was new. It was here in our faces. Those plants and companies should have been nationalized because we can reconvert those factories and any other idle factories that are lying around. You know, it's a post-industrial wasteland out there. We can reconvert those. Back in the 1940s, in order to get the war going and make weaponry and the various things we needed for war, we were reconverting factories left and right to build whatever we needed. And if we can do that back then, surely we can do it today. Reconvert them to build whatever you want, modern rail, mass transit, farm tractors, aerospace equipment, all this for exports or, you know, just right here in this country. But high capital intensive goods, we can reconvert those factories to make anything we want. And of course that means jobs. Extend long-term cheap credit, not just to the top multinational corporations that are involved in manufacturing things and making things, Caterpillar, you know, what have you. It's got to be dragoon from the top down, the bottom up, all the way to the biggest firms on the planet that make things and do good things in terms of manufacturing, down to the auto and electronics repair shops, dry cleaners, restaurants, family farms, taxis, trucking, various other types of businesses. And you also got to maintain commercial credit for retail stores. It's not great that 3/4 of our economy is consumer spending, retail, stuff like this. But it's what we have. It's here. So you kind of got to keep that going a little bit, or else you're going to lose that part of your economy real quick. So you got to keep commercial credit for that kind of stuff. And also, it's of my opinion that the Federal Reserve, it's fine to have commercial banks at the Federal Reserve in terms of having an account. If you're a bank, a commercial bank that's involved in providing credit to needed things, manufacturing, such as these things, that's fine. You can have an account. But credit's got to be dragooned everywhere, top down, bottom up. Now, the electrical grid. We have to modernize our electrical grid. It's getting old, it's outdated, and we can do this. Just, like I said, all that's missing is credit and political will. So we suggest modernizing this electrical grid in our country and provide low-cost energy with 1,000 fourth-generation pebble-bed high-temperature reactors of 1,000 to 2,000 megawatts each. Nuclear is the way the world is going, most of it. There's a lot of demagogy. There's a lot of things said about nuclear. I've heard them all. I've heard all the arguments. But nuclear is the way to go. Solar, wind, these are fine for individual uses, business uses. But it's not enough to provide that base load capacity. You need something stronger. So nuclear is the way to go. And if you're scared about nuclear, The picture on the left is a plant in Southport, or close to Southport, I guess. Built in the 70s. And yeah, you know, there's going to be a little bit of fear from that. You know, it's old, it's outdated. What could happen? So let's build something new. This is a high temperature pebble bed reactor on the right side. It's the only nuclear plant in Africa of this type. And it's small, it's very powerful. Dylan also showed me one in China, even smaller than this. So we can rebuild high-tech, modern nuke plants everywhere. Develop thermonuclear fusion technology. If you're scared of nuclear and the old technology of that, why not develop thermonuclear fusion technology? That's the next step. We have to bring our species to the next step. And once we find something that's better than nuclear fusion, once we get that ready and in place, well, we got to go for that. And once we find something that's better than that, well, we got to go for that, and on and on and on. We got to go. We got to go. It's our species' destiny to go to space. I'm telling you, that's our destiny. We have the technology, we have the capabilities, and quite frankly, 4 billion years from now, whenever it is, when the sun starts to explode, I want the human race to be there, populating this solar system, saying, hey guys, well, the sun's about to blow up, we got to pack our bags and move, and we'll be able to move. That's the goal. So we have to go, and I want to go. I want to go. Scientific and technological progress. That's what this species is all about. That's what sets us apart from birds and dogs and other animals. We're special in that way. We create things, we build things. And then this is absolutely indispensable technology. We must invest in it. You're sick of oil, you're sick of fossil fuels, well, there you go. Rebuild the rail system of 50,000 miles of ultra-modern maglev Amtrak rail reaching into every state. Can you imagine going to work or traveling on a rocket ship going 350 to 400 miles an hour? And people always say, oh, they don't want it, people don't want it. Well, they do want it. They might not know they want it, but they do. If we were to rebuild this all throughout the country and make this kind of transportation technology highly ubiquitous within our society everywhere, this would be absolutely conducive to, you know, higher rates of mobility within the country. And the technology of this type was originated here in the U.S., and it's a shame that we don't utilize it because other developed countries are. The advantage of the United States is we are such a post-industrial wasteland by now that we can turn that into an advantage. We can come from the bottom all the way to the very top, to the most modern and the most sophisticated high-tech equipment known to man. Other developed countries don't have that capability because they've already put a lot of this stuff in place. But we can make that an advantage, build this. It's definitely going to be conducive to rising standards of living, mobility. You got to rebuild the interstate highway system, the 21st century standards. Regarding our infrastructure, we're pretty much at a D rating on everything. D. Maybe a C here and there, but it's mostly D. This is unacceptable. Like I said, in a world of tens of trillions of dollars going to big banks, well, we got to get tens of trillion dollars going to this kind of stuff. So rebuild the highway system. Cars are going to be around for, you know, a decent amount of time. There's no sign that cars are going to go away anytime soon. So bring this up to standard. Now, drinking water, wastewater systems, you got to rebuild all this. It's not a year that goes by that we don't hear 3 or 4 stories on the news that say, you know, that tell us about some pipe that's busted, flooding the roads in the neighborhoods, or some bridge that's collapsed. You know, so we have to rebuild these pipes and infrastructure in our wastewater and drinking water systems. And of course, promote canal building and irrigation. That top picture there, the Panama Canal being built in 1913. We have to encourage these big projects because it makes the movement of trade, commerce, much more mobile and easier. So we must promote that. Build 1,000 500-bed modern hospitals to meet the minimum Hill-Burton standards of 1946, and the minimum Hill-Burton standards of 1946 said that we needed 4.5 hospital beds per 1,000 people in the population. That's the minimum. Now we're at 3, or a little bit above 3. So 3 beds per 1,000 people in our society. This is, again, unacceptable. And we can build 1,000 hospitals in various strategic areas, rural areas, inner city areas. There's so many times that somebody has a heart attack out in the middle of the sticks somewhere, and they die in the ambulance because the ambulance takes 30 minutes to get there, and 30 minutes to get to the hospital. So we got to place these things in strategic areas where we know it's going to be easier for people to get care quickly. Now, farming and agriculture, very indispensable sector of the economy. We have to keep these farms going. These family farms that go back generations, it's what they know, it's what they love, it's what they do. So, provide a debt freeze for the duration of the crisis, freeze debt payments and amnesty on debt for farmers, freeze the payments, 0% federal credit for working capital and capital improvements to upgrade their farms and farming equipment. Excuse me again. A ban on farm foreclosures. We cannot afford to have farms foreclosed because they cannot meet debt payments or whatever. This is our food. This is how we feed ourselves. So we cannot afford to have these things foreclosed just because a bank doesn't have its payment on time. Federal price supports at 110% of parity across the board. What that essentially means is that it protects farmers' bottom line, so that if speculators decide to drive the price of corn or wheat or grain or whatever down to levels that farmers can't sell and make a profit, they're protected. So, parity. Any farm surpluses should be used for a Food for Peace program. Dylan and I and the people in the UFAA and the Tax Wall Street Party, we definitely have one maxim, and that is that we are against genocide, absolutely against it. And it's estimated that 40 to 50,000 people a day, 40 to 50,000 people a day on this planet die from starvation, malnutrition, diseases that can be cured for pennies. This is absolutely unacceptable. In the world today in 2015, we can't let this happen. We have to have people being born, people having babies, the population of the world rising. And don't think that the world is overpopulated. It's not. I can't tell you guys enough. I can't stress that enough. We have plenty of wide open spaces. And the technology exists to accommodate billions and billions and arguably trillions of people on this planet. So, any surpluses can be used for a Food for Peace program to ship to the third world. Now, try this on for size. I speak for myself here. I haven't discussed this with Webster or anybody else, but this looks like some great technology. I mean, look at that. It's a food skyscraper with integrated, intricate hydroponics built in. This is exciting. I mean, might even hurt the farmers a little bit. I don't know. You start placing these around, farmers might be a little bit outdated, but nevertheless, we got to keep the farmers going. It's what they know. It's what they love. It's their family tradition. But nevertheless, let's try these. Let's try these on for size. Let's see how these do. You can put a solar panel up there. If that doesn't do the job, you get that energy coming from the nuclear plants that we're building. This is how we can feed the human race. Good gosh. Got student loans? I think Dylan over there does. This is absolutely crushing young people in this country. They can't get married. They can't have kids. They can't, start a life. This debt is crushing them. So, use that Federal Reserve. Finance over the $1 trillion or more in financial debt that these students have taken on, down to 0%. Freeze the debt and freeze the payments for 5 years. 5 years, we'll come back, we'll talk about it. Not promising anything. But refinance down to 0%, Yuppies can get 0% on their debt. Students can get 0% on their debt, and anybody else for that matter. So, freeze debt payments as well. 5 years. Now, while you're doing all this, you got to keep people alive. You got to keep people eating. You got to protect your human capital. You got to invest in people. Did I mention we are unabashedly against austerity, and what that means is we are against cuts to Medicare, Social Security, food stamps, jobless benefits, WIC, Head Start, related programs. It seems that everybody agrees, Republicans, Democrats, the establishment types, of course, cavemen, anybody else, that in order to get this country blossoming again, we have to have real structural reforms. And that's just a nice, fancy, rosy term for cuts. Cuts to entitlements, quote unquote, Social Security, Medicaid, Medicare, all of the stuff. Now you could sit there and say, oh, well, I'm a libertarian Austrian school Republican. That's government, decadence. Well, sorry, you're a fascist if you're coming to take the American people's rights in an economic depression. Okay? All you're going to create, if you cut the food stamp budget or any of this cold turkey, you're going to create death. Literally. I don't care if it's 50%, 1%, 0.00001% of that food stamp budget that's going to die and starve. The fact is, it's a percentage, and it ain't going to happen under our policies. So you got to expand this stuff. You got to keep this going. Restore all cuts, the sequester, all the shenanigans, full funding at improved levels. People say, oh, well, there's so much decadence on this. And I've seen it too, you know, and I'm not for it. But compare that decadence to the decadence that the yuppies are foisting on our government. Tens of trillions and trillions and trillions. That's decadence. And that's what we need to stop and tame first before we start cutting average people's benefits. So, restore all of this stuff at enhanced levels. We offer a Medicare for all type system. That's what we agitate for. Don't say single payer system. Nobody knows what that means. Say Medicare for all. I don't know about you, but I don't know too many senior citizens that are bankrupt by medical bills. They might be bankrupt by other things, but I don't know too many senior citizens that are bankrupt by medical bills. You might, I don't. Why? It's because of Medicare. And Medicare has shown to work beautifully over the years. It's got a 2 or 3% overhead in that program. But health insurance companies, they have a 30 to 40% overhead. So 30% to 40% of your premiums that you pay every month for health insurance goes to overhead for those companies to run. And of course, with a 1% Wall Street sales tax, a restructured tax code where corporations actually pay the 35% corporate income tax rate. You know, the one that people like to say, oh, it's one of the highest in the world, but actually nobody ever pays it because there's so many loopholes and all this. Restore the tax code to make those people pay the Wall Street sales tax. You could fund this. You could create this. So $100 per month per person. If you want Medicare, reduce rates for families, students, unemployed. If you're totally destitute, you even get more of a subsidy, or you get it for free, depending on your situation. We have to take care of people. You have to cover people. So, working with other interested nations, heavily invest in biomedical research to cure diseases. That's how you're going to save costs. There's no need to commit genocide by cutting Medicare, Medicaid, all this other stuff. Cure it. Cure diseases. And by God, there's cures out there. We can do it. We can come together. It's all about coming together, putting the priorities right, putting the energy and effort towards it. We can do it. We split the atom in 1940 or 45 with the Manhattan Project. We split the atom back then. Sure enough, we can cure some diseases in 2015. Invest in high energy physics, including lasers, develop fusion power like we were talking about earlier, and beyond. Infinity and beyond. We have to go. Do this with interested nations, Russia, China, India, what have you. This is how we can come together as a world. Invest in a multi-decade NASA program, Moon, Mars, manned exploration, permanent colonization, and industrial production. You also got to rebuild the Middle East, reconstruction, a development program. In case you haven't noticed, the Middle East is pretty torn up right now. And it's as a result of policies of the Anglo-American transatlantic world and their allies. They say Libya, Syria, are civil wars. Well, they are not civil wars. They are very insidious destabilization campaigns, purposeful destabilization campaigns, and we need to reconstruct those countries. The bridge tunnel combinations to span the Bering Strait, the Straits of Gibraltar, the Straits of Malacca, the Silicon Narrows. You got to connect Japan to the Asian mainland. The second Panama Canal, the Crocanals, Eurasian Silk Road, Cape to Cairo, Dakar, to Djibouti, Australian coastal and inter-American rail projects, and more. In other words, do the things, do the projects of great world infrastructure that have been on the drawing board for years, and do them. These are projects of great infrastructure that need to be done, and we can come together with these various countries and do them. They would create jobs, not just in other countries, but Americans as well. This can be a global program. We're in a global economic depression. It's worldwide. It has to be in lockstep with other countries as we go through this recovery program. Now, measures to relaunch world trade, promote world recovery. This is arguably what you should do first, like one of the kind of first things you should do. Like say if I was running for president, between November and January when you come into office, you need to be meeting with heads of state, with willing participating governments on how to create a new world monetary system. And what we fight for is something emulating the Bretton Woods monetary system. From 1944 to 1971, we had a monetary system, and it worked very well. It's called the Bretton Woods monetary system, where currencies were fixed to one another, not allowed to float and have the speculators and international bankers have their say on our currencies, but they were fixed rates, and they were agreed upon and mandated by governments. It'd be like if Japan agreed that 350 yen equals $1, and that's what it is. We have to do this because business owners, once this kind of monetary system is in place, business owners will know what a dollar is going to be worth, not just 3 months down the line, a year down the line, but 3, 5 years down the line, because that's when they're going to have to pay. That's, they take out the credit, the debt to pay for their facilities, their infrastructure. They pay off that debt years later. So the dollar can't be worth more, 30% more, 30% less at that time when they're going to pay. Those currencies need to be fixed. Narrow bands of oscillation enforced between these currencies, enforced by these governments. Now, there's a lot of talk about gold, a lot of gold bugs out there. In my opinion, they've been thoroughly discredited. Have you seen the dollar recently? Good Lord. It's rallied like 8 or 9 months in a row. It's the longest consecutive monthly advance in the dollar index in the post-Bretton Woods monetary system. So, the dollar's not crashing. We don't need to back our currency up with gold. It's very inconducive to our system today. It's not practical. And plus, there's not enough gold. The money supply of the U.S. is so big today, there's not enough gold to back all the money that's in it. But what you can have is institute clearing of gold settlement among member states, and that essentially means you add up what I sold to you, I add up what you sold to me, and we settle that difference between those exports and imports in gold. So it would keep the United States in check on keeping a productive economy, an economy that makes things and exports more than we import. Because if we start importing more than we export with this kind of gold clearing, you're going to be running out of gold in 4, 5, 6 years, depending on how much you're importing. relative to how little you're exporting. So it would keep us in check on staying a productive nation, making high capital intensive goods that the world needs. And by God, the world needs them. Africa, the Middle East, those areas of the world can be lifted up big time. And they're going to need goods. They're going to need things as their economies flourish over the coming decades, hopefully. That's why we need to take power. Now, replace the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, with a multilateral development bank, much like the BRICS. Anybody heard of the BRICS bank? No? Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, they have all come together and created the BRICS bank, a developmental bank that is all about financing world infrastructure and financing things that are conducive for human beings and their standards of living. There's two systems at play with each other and at war with each other in this world. We have the Anglo-American transatlantic system, and that's arguably the United States, Great Britain, Israel, Australia, New Zealand, others. And we have the BRICS, Russia, India, China, Brazil. And this system is clashing with each other because the BRICS nations, they want to go the route of human beings and the human species, more or less. And say what you want about these individual countries, they're not perfect. But they're wanting to go the route of taking the species to the next level. And the Anglo-American transatlantic system have built their house on speculation, derivatives, imperialism. They've been taken over by a ruling class that cannot be allowed to rule anymore. So, replace the IMF once our party gets in power, hopefully, sooner rather than later. Create a new IMF, put it in chapter whatever bankruptcy, and write off the debt that they have among nations and start fresh, in line with the BRICS Bank. Now, this program will create about 30 million jobs here in the United States in less than 5 years. It will end the Depression, rebuild the U.S. economy, improve wages and standards of living, restart productive investment, attain full employment with increased levels of capital investment per job, restore corporate profits in the industrial sense. And most of the orders that will be placed under this program will go to private sector bidders here in the United States. The vast majority of them will. And because of the vastly increased volume of goods put on the market, inflation will not result. Some of the more sophisticated members here might be asking themselves, well, hey, Eric, you're going to create tens of trillions of dollars out of that Federal Reserve. You're going to use it to build all this stuff. Ain't some inflation going to arise from that? I mean, good God, that's a lot of money. Excuse me. Well, first of all, not really, because you're dragooning that credit into real things, tangible things, things that give you a permanent advantage, that stay with you. Not speculation, not consumption, not all this other various shenanigans, but real things, things that give us a permanent advantage and that stay with us. And plus, even if inflation did arise some, 2, 3, 4%, whatever, it's not necessarily that terrible of a thing because the American people have so much debt that if we have a massive deflationary crash, like the Ron Paul Libertarian Austrian School Camp wants, well, guess what? Everybody's going to be liquidated because if the dollar becomes massively stronger in such a short amount of time, it's going to be impossible for the American people and the various institutions in America to pay off this debt because dollars are going to be worth a lot more than at the time that you took out this debt when dollars were a lot cheaper. So inflation, it's a total red herring. There is no inflation today. Make no mistake. Food prices go up and real estate prices have gone up in recent decades because of derivatives. Derivatives, derivatives, derivatives. Remember that term. It's not inflation. Yes, there's some inflation baked in there, but it's mainly derivatives contracts where these yuppies, these speculators, drive up the price of these commodities using these synthetic derivatives and these financial pieces of hokum. That's what causes the rising food prices. Make no mistake about it. Don't listen to anybody that tells you, oh, you know, everything's more expensive now because the dollar's worth nothing. Well, that's not really true. The dollar is worth something still. Now, that is pretty much my program for today, for tonight. I'd like to thank you all for coming and attending this. You people are not apathetic. You people are interested in the strategic, political situation of the day, and I commend you. You're here tonight. You're soaking up whatever you can, something different, something outside the box, and I absolutely commend you for showing up today, and I hope to include this in your political agitations. So thank you for showing up tonight.